fundamentally, are the attitudes I'm pushing to change actually the drivers for the behaviors I'm hoping to manifest? Now, in my program, I've never been trying to convince a rapist not to rape. I've mainly worked with college and above. I feel like teaching rapists not to rape actually needs to come much, much younger. And in terms of the limited exposure I would get to 4 years of college students or cadets or whatever, I'm not going to undo a whole bunch of that. So the behavior I'm always driving to change is to mobilize a community around them. That if we create a community around with two norms, violence won't be tolerated, so none of this crap is okay with us, and in real life we all actually will intervene and look out for each other. Like if I can create around potential perpetrators those two norms, we can control the behavior in that way, right? So that's what I'm driving for. And so what I've come to recognize and believe is the thing I need them to agree on in order to act, and I alluded to this yesterday, is that rape is not okay. Like if they agree rape is not okay, there's nothing else I have to change. All I got to do is give them tools to act on that, right? The reality is, lots and lots of people, I would hazard a guess, just about every person who has ever intervened in a high-risk situation still carries with them some of our problematic attitudes. They still probably have victim-blaming tapes that go, I won't ask for a show of hands, but I know I am not immune from the culture I was raised in. And I can hear about a case in a certain way, or I can talk to someone and I can go, yeah, that does sound. And I can go, my brain can go victim blaming. That's the world I was raised in. I am not pure of that. I know I still have a predisposition towards laughing at jokes that probably technically don't count as appropriate. Like I'll laugh at a sexist joke, right? I know I can still drop the B word, right? And I don't say that tritely and proudly. I say, I am a manifestation of those things. I still carry many of those things, and I'm willing to intervene. And just about everyone I've ever talked to still carries varying degrees of these attitudes, but where their line is, but I still don't want to see someone get raped. So if I see a high-risk situation, I'm going to intervene. So I think the first thing I questioned was, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's not a prerequisite to create these perfect people before them to intervene. Maybe I already have consensus on what I'm wanting them to do, which is rape is not okay, will you intervene in it, right? The second thing is a little bit longer, and we'll actually get to that. That was the short answer. That's my short. That's my one-word answer.
I stopped typing 5 minutes ago.
Right?
But Dorothy, at the bottom line of this whole thing is this concept that where we all have kind of come to problems with, if we can just explain it to you enough, you're gonna step up or sign up to what we're selling. And
yes.
The big change for me was when I started working with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and folks like Dorothy on this. It was like, no, you can talk to people till you're blue in the face, and they're still not necessarily going to buy what you're selling. But if you create an environment where you expect certain kinds of behaviors, which, by the way, you guys are all masters at here. If you create the environment and say, this is our expectation, and you will conform your behavior to the expectations of this environment, or at least you write policies and programs and stuff that brings them to do that, that seems to be the key.
Right. Yes, and it ties me, and again, this is going to thread through some other things, but it ties me to, so not only was I going, well, maybe the attitude that I really need them to have, rape is bad, is actually an adequate starting point to begin behavior change, but the second piece of that is, that the assumption was that misplaced attitudes or inadequate knowledge was the reason they weren't acting. And what I have come to discover is, I believe there are lots of other things that are actually inhibiting people from acting. And we'll get into that more. But I believe, so even if I'm well-intentioned, right, and even if I'm going, I see something high risk, my gut is going, this isn't okay, and I don't want this to happen, I can run up against barriers. I can run up against, I'm afraid of retaliation. I can run up against, this can impact my rank, my career. I can run up against, I'm not even sure what to do. I don't want to be embarrassed. And this matters because if that's the reason that's stopping them, they already have the attitude aligned with what I'm wanting, which is rape is not okay. But I just keep giving them knowledge, attitude, training to get. It's already there. That was never the problem. The problem was I was giving them tools that were not realistic for them. Here's an example. I would stand in front of a group, and we would do a high-risk situation, some sort of role play, right? And then we'd go, okay, what would you do if you saw this bystander? And everyone in the room knew the right answer. The right answer is, hey man, knock it off. That's not cool. So they know how to do the role play. They know what they're supposed to say. And then we all go, it's, yeah, they did. Yeah. They knew what. And everyone, and they said the right answer. And probably all of us, but certainly all of them are thinking, yeah, that's never going to happen. You know, that 18, 19-year-old, no, they're not in that situation trying to go up to that person who's older and go up and do it. Like, we're all, but they did. But the message, when we got to even bystander intervention, the message was, if you're a good person, right? If you're a good person, you will step in and you will do the right thing. And what the right thing means is you will walk right up there and you will call this thing out directly. That's what we put out there. That's where the conversation was around yesterday. This is about moral courage. This is about character. So if what I put out there is, if you are a person of moral courage and character, every time you see something high risk, you're going to step up and you're going to do the right thing. What are the chances I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to say, actually, that would be really hard for me. Actually, in real life, the social pressure in that situation would be too much. Actually, the fear of what might happen in my rank, actually, no one is going to raise their hand and say, I know, sir, I agree philosophically, but that doesn't change, and I'm afraid that they're going to kick my ass later, right? So instead, we stifle reality so that we can do a successful role play, do a rousing talk on character, and they walk out of our trainings no more equipped to realistically do anything than when they came in. So when I think about what the change we're trying to drive, I always go, and we talked this about a little bit when we were talking about your daughters. It's like, here's how I want the world to be for you. And then you said, but here's how it really is. So let's talk real. And I feel like we have to do the same thing. Here is the world we are aspiring to have. Here's the world as we want it to be. Here are the character qualities we want cadets at West Point to aspire towards. But we're going to build solutions for the world as it is. We're going to build solutions that will drive you towards that place, as opposed to solutions that assume you're already there, right? And so this idea of, instead of going, we just kept going, oh, it must be the broken attitudes. What I came to believe was, I don't believe it was their broken attitudes that was the problem. I believe it was my broken solutions that was the problem. Because I kept just putting out there the right answer, right? That absolutely was not realistic. And might I say, not just not realistic for 18-year-old cadets, but given the right context, there is no one in every single situation that will do the thing they most wanted to do. Familial norms. Hey, in my family, we just don't talk about this. We just don't call this out. Career concerns. The peer stuff, right? We don't have a pep talk or a poster campaign that makes 18-year-olds no longer care what their peers think. It doesn't exist. It was true for us. It's true of them. That's a real thing, right? And so there's not a poster campaign or a catchy slogan that's going to make fear of getting your butt kicked, fear of retaliation go away. Because very often, that's a real fear. It's a real thing, right? Like, all of these contexts, all of these barriers are real. And we have to build solutions to that without assuming that if you have barriers, you're somehow less than a person of character, because then I will never admit it to you. One of the most, I do some work with the Air Force, and one of the most important things I think have been happening in the last year is having senior leadership, having people with multiple stars on their uniform, standing in front of a room talking about a time. Not a time when they were 18, but a time 3 months ago when they were sitting in a meeting and conversation started going somewhere uncomfortable and their gut was going, but there they were with all the other stars in the room and just didn't call it out in that setting. And when they go, I'm still a real airman. When they go, like, this is real, all of us have trouble. It's not about what exactly you do, it's that you do something, suddenly you create a space. But that's not about attitudes, it's about realistic solutions, right? And so where we begin to talk about is, there can't just be one right answer to mobilize people to action. It can't just be you do this direct intervention, the one we see that makes us all clap. There's got to be other options. You can create a distraction. You can delegate it to someone else. You can, come up with a million different ways to diffuse that particular situation. And if that way doesn't happen to be calling it out directly, it still counts, right? It still counts. Anyway, so that was my second really succinct answer to a question that I don't even remember was asked. Yes.
Along that line, I see a lot of people think harsher punishments will then change behavior. What does the research show on using punishment as deterrent or changing behavior?
Yeah. Nate, do you know about the enforcement stuff?
Absolutely. So, worked with sex offenders for many, many, many years, and what I can tell you is not a single one of them ever thought that what they did was illegal, right? Sex offenders use strong, what we call cognitive distortions, they're rationalizations. She wanted it. I was offering a public service. I have a penis, they need to have it, I'm just doing that. I'm just doing that to be friendly. Weird, strange thoughts like this is what drive their behavior. So when you come out with strong messages like, you're going to go to jail, you do this, you do the crime, you do the time, all this kind of stuff, every single one of them looks at it and says, yeah, that probably sounds right if, those sex offenders are bad people and they need to go to jail. But they don't think themselves as sex offenders, especially for the 85% of sex crimes that happen in the DOD and also here at West Point, where it happens between two people that know each other, right? And the two people that know each other, it's like, what I'm doing here is not a crime. I mean, at least in my head. So when we say if you're going to go to jail if you do these things, it's important to have a powerful or a good accountability system so that justice can be done. But deterrence messages don't work largely because the offenders they don't register with the offenders as anything. And also, too, deterrence research shows that the only time that you're ever able to stop someone from doing a crime is when they have an immediate and visible chance of getting caught. Literally right in the moment. So that's why you stick a cop on every police corner. Yeah, you might see crime reduced, but that just simply does not drive behavior, because the minute you get away from the cop, then people will do what they want to do. And so our messages about you're going to go to jail just largely don't last. And so it tends to, and not only that, but it's specifically with sexual assault, they're hollow messages, because the vast majority of sexual assaults aren't reported, right? And so you say, hey, if you commit sexual assault, even if what I thought what I was doing was sexual assault, I know I'm not going to go to jail because that victim is going to be embarrassed, and I'm going to make sure that she or he is embarrassed and doesn't want to come forward. And not only that, but the chances that I'm going to go to jail, even in our own statistics, I can tell you that less than 15% of people that are accused of a sexual assault will actually end up in a kind of accountability action. And so it's pretty small beans. And so that's at least some kind of jail time associated with that. We have a lot of accountability actions, and so we do pretty good with that, but it is a very, very small number compared to what actually occurs. So that's why when we talk about deterrence, we want to talk about the fact that, yes, the military justice system is good, and we're working in it, and and it's strong, and there's many things for commanders to do to hold people appropriately accountable, but it does not deter and it does not prevent sexual assault the way that we would hope it could.
Looking at this first piece, and this is something that came up over and over, both in the report and in these conversations with you. There is a fundamental problem of we can't get people to engage positively in prevention, right? That there's this kind of fundamental issue, not just here at West Point, but across our country, in college campuses, high schools, military settings, and this begs the question of why. Most people think rape is wrong. Lots and lots of people have some sort of connection to interpersonal violence. Maybe they grew up in a domestic violence home. Maybe someone that they care about has been assaulted. Like, most people have a connection directly, or they know someone. Just about everyone agrees it's wrong. This should be an easy home run for us. Like, everyone should be pounding down the doors to come to our next training, right? Why aren't they? And that's what began to drive my need for my exploration of what is the disconnect here. What I'm selling should be readily bought, right? Why aren't they buying it? And I began to look outside our field, because I'm like, I can't just keep rereading my own crap, like our own stuff in the field. If we had it figured out, we'd be doing it. So I began to consult with this guy from a communication school, and he began to talk about the issue through the idea of marketing, of brand specifically, right? And so when I talk about brand, I'm talking about literally when I say a company or a product or even an idea, what are the associations that come to my mind, right? And depending on your association, perfect fries, your teenagers, the truly puzzling McRib sandwich.
Delicious.
Like, do they hire someone to paint the grill lines on to make it look like it's been grilled?
There's no ribs in the McRib.
We do that here.
There is. So whatever your associations are, you are either a big McDonald's fan and you go lots, or you're not a McDonald's fan at all, right? You say McDonald's, and we all have these associations that come up. And some of the associations McDonald's did on purpose, right? And some of the stuff is just because of our childhood and who we hang out with and what happened to us once when we bit into that McRib sandwich, right? Like, some of them are on purpose, some of them is not. The sum total is I either like McDonald's or I don't. Associations, what comes to your mind when you think Starbucks?
Free birthday drink.
Free birthday drink, expensive. Nate is just going, how delicious.
The blood of life.
They what?
They sold the super size.
See? Association. I don't know what they... So we have all of these associations, and based on those associations, some of us do not show up every day without our Starbucks, and some of us go, no way, they're driving out the mountain, blah, blah, I'll never buy it, whatever, right? Take the same idea. However you want to call this, violence against women, it's just an umbrella that's often been nested, or sexual assault. Like, if I did this activity, and instead of you all sitting here, it was just a generalized swath of cadets. And I said, just like I did with Starbucks, I said, okay, when you hear sexual assault or a sexual assault prevention or a sexual assault program you got to go to, what comes to mind? What would come to mind? Oversaturation.
Waste of time.
Waste of time. I'm not a rapist.
Hate men.
Training.
I hate men. Training.
Boring.
Mandatory. Boring.
It's a crime.
It's a crime.
Real problem.
Huh?
Real problem.
Real problem.
So, yeah. Mostly negative.
Right?
My Saturday mornings are shot here at West Point.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a range. I mean, as just happened here, it happens all the time, the vast majority of the descriptors are negative. Very often, I'd say 90% of the time, if I do an activity like this, every descriptor is negative. Sometimes there's some positive, a few positive, and they tend to be associated with the response side. Of I had someone safe to talk to, I had a really good advocate experience, right? There's some. But overall, when you say it, people, you listen to it, and I answered my question. I went, oh, this is why people aren't engaged with something they actually agree with. Because they're no longer even connected to this fundamental commonality of we think rape is wrong. Instead, when I say it, what they hear is another mandatory training. They all think they're rapists. They make a big deal at everything, learn how to take a joke, victim blaming argument. Like, it's almost all negative. So it doesn't matter. Go back to my really creative and innovative iceberg model. It doesn't matter, that top of the iceberg. It doesn't matter what new program I bring in, because before you even get in front of the room, they're like this, right? Oh, here comes Kasha, right? Oh, here comes this thing, right? They're not, something is broken. They're shut down before we even start. So what we got to go to, and again, these are some of the elements that I think need to be, what I realized is if we don't get this right, if we don't figure out how the brand is broken, and if we don't make the effort to explicitly fix it, then we're going to just keep bringing in program after program that might otherwise have a chance to succeed, but because we never fix the fun, like I can be serving 5-star food in my restaurant, but if the association is they have rats in their kitchen, it doesn't matter what the reality is, right? So a couple that I want to pull out from here. And this one I start with because this one was a theme that came up a lot. And that was the idea of the negative gendered components here, right? Specifically, all men are rapists and all women are victims, right? And this, again, this is universal, and they come by it honestly. When I did my work, when we still as a field mostly do our work, we have been talking about two characters, a potential perpetrator and a potential victim. Men get the potential perpetrator, women get the potential victim. And all of our education then is filtered through one of those two, right? So consent, policies, no means no, yes means yes, like all of the messages that somehow say, unless we're really clear about this, you all are, you're on the brink, right, of being the problem. With women, we didn't do a lot better, right? We told men don't rape, we told women don't get raped. We call it risk reduction. Don't walk alone, and don't do this, and don't do this, and don't do this, which has been soundly as disempowering and disengaging for women as don't be a rapist was for men. Women resent going, I am the only relevancy you have here is a potential victim. I find particularly military women giving a very respectful middle finger to me. Like, that is not the limit of who I am. And that limitation of men and women are only a part of a problem effectively disengaged both of them, right? We often, I was saying this, often we focus on how we've lost men, and so all these efforts about how do we re-engage men, but the assumption there is that we've successfully engaged women, and we haven't. We've engaged more women than men because we've engaged more victims and women are disproportionately victimized and we get drawn to the field. But if you look at a typical Take Back the Night on a college campus, 100 people come out of 40,000 people. 75 of them may be women, but that still leaves the 39,925 women that aren't there. So we've lost them both. Neither one of them are drawn to the brand. What are we going to do differently about that, right? And so as you're looking to pick programs, obviously now where the field is going, which I believe is a good turn, is talking to men and women through the same lens, which is allies, right? Which is however you want to call it, bystanders, allies, community members. Like basically our culture is shaped, the culture of West Point is shaped by the critical mass of men and women, shoulder to shoulder. What do they believe? What do they accept? What are their behaviors and attitudes, right? And collectively, they define. They are the solution. They are the only solution. The sum total of the men and women on this campus. That is the sum total of your culture. And so how do we engage them as part of the solution? And so the key here is mobilizing them as allies, giving them the skills they need to engage in a positive way towards creating those culture norms. What we have to think about in the meantime is, it's not like we say, well, starting in August, like we have realized the error of all our ways, right? So starting in August, right, we got a blank slate. You don't have a blank slate in August. In August, they still have the same associations they've had all the time. And if the default is, well, now we're going to go neutral, right? We're not going to do anything. We're just going to kind of go neutral, so we're not demonizing men or we're going to go neutral. If you go neutral, right, then you kind of go back to the default settings, right? The default settings is they're all man-haters. So the strategy has to not just go, okay, we're going to now do bystander programs, for example, that include both men and women. The strategy also has to include programming and messaging and campaigns that actively try to make up for lost ground, that actively are engaging men and women in a positive way, that's actively taking ownership of, I believe, taking ownership of missteps, right? I have 2 sons that are, how many of you have sons? Okay, so I have 2 sons that are cuter than all yours. They just went to their first dance. Oh, they're so handsome. I might have embarrassed them a little. We were doing about, it's their first formal, they're in 8th grade, it's the end of the year, and they're going with their girlfriends, the first dance with their girlfriends. And so we were talking about if they were going to kiss them or not. One of them admitted he hadn't kissed. I don't know about the other one. So we're talking about consent, right? We're talking about how would you know, and there was all the words, and I could ask and I could whatever. But then we did I was like, well, so if you don't use your words, what are other ways you might know? My wife and I did role plays for them. I was like, now I'm going to go in for a kiss. Now you tell me if your mother wants me to kiss her or doesn't want it. And so I may have scarred them for some good period of time. They're like, make it stop. So yes, that programming. So it means we got to really go on the side of. Let me give you another example of what I'm talking about. When I was, 10 years ago, when I was and still am gay, the default was that's not a safe thing to be, right? Like this could impact my job. It certainly could impact whether people like me or not. I could lose friends. I could lose family. And so I had to be careful all the time, right? Well, then things began to change, and it kind of began to be a little more inclusive and tolerant. But when I walked into an office, if it was just blank, so there's nothing anti anymore, but it's just blank, like they just neutralized it. It's not hetero anything anymore. It's just kind of neutral. They took out anything that is. My default assumption for a long time was still, the moment I say the word wife, am I going to lose them, right? What helped me during that period was when people stuck those stinking rainbow things on their door. They had to proactively make up for years of it not being safe. So I would go, oh, they're letting me know that they're not the norm anymore. They're not that default setting. And I needed that proactive step. So when you think about your strategy, think you've got a lot of alienated men, a lot of folks that are pissed at this brand, a lot of folks that think all of these things that you all have already talked about. What are you going to do proactively to communicate something new is happening, that we're going to have a new and different relationship, right? How are you going to do this rebranding? And so that needs to drive, I believe, as you think about the manifestation of the strategy. And honestly, and this is getting a little bit detail-oriented, but I also think you have to be overly cautious for at least a year or 2 or 3 while you kind of go through this rebranding, healing process that again isn't West Point. It's every college campus, the whole man-hating thing is universal, right? We as a field have to go through a period where we have to swing the other way, where we have to, I believe, we have to be really careful about programming that ultimately will want to be normal programming. Things that specifically call out men and masculinity. Things that specifically, again, were we all neutral and positive, men would be super receptive to, yeah, I'd love to explore this kind of part of me, or yeah, I'd love to look at toxic masculinity, or yeah, I'd love to see how my male privilege is impacting. Like, those are things that, good men are interested in time, if they're not already pissed that you keep coming after them, right? And so I think for a while, we probably want the pendulum to go, we're going to just approach as allies. We're just going to approach as a part of the solution. We're not going to require you to dig down and grow for a little while. And I don't mean that literally, but I mean if they're already sensitive to it, right? And you do 3 programs that are totally about ally and you're a part of the solution, but then they're just putting their foot in the water going, okay, maybe. But then the 4th one is, we're going to deconstruct your broken masculinity. Then suddenly they're going to go, whoa, wait, I thought it was different. So I just think we have to be cautious.
Can't tell them.
Sucker!
Cautious, right?
So-
Just be cautious. Cautious with the programs that you're picking. Cautious with how, even not our intention, and not even if it's right. Because this may be good, legit content but it doesn't matter if it's right if they're not hearing it. And so being really deliberate about, if I bring in this program, how will it perpetuate, even without intention, will it perpetuate that negative brand association, right? Or will it counter it? And kind of having some honest dialogue about that, and maybe even with your cadets, even with your target audience, yeah.
Dorothy, do you have any examples of what other schools might have done to kind of backtrack and kind of do that healing piece? So that, I mean, West Point here has to do it for themselves, but what does that look like conceptually?
Okay. There are several different things, and they're not all required. There's just different approaches folks have taken. I personally went through a time where, and this is very controversial in the field among women with me, that disagree with the approach. I personally spent a good period of time, and I'll still do it in front of predominantly male audiences, is I owned it out front. Like it wasn't a game. I just explicitly said, for a long time, people like me have stood in front of you and put you in this role. And I was misguided. My intentions were good. Here's what I was working with at the time. So everything was gone. Everything was filtered through perpetrator or victim. That's all we knew as a field. And I misstepped. And I've learned, and I've reconsidered. And my hope is that you will also reconsider, that you will reconsider hearing me out. And you want to see, I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're like all fuming, you're ready to you're mad at your spouse or your partner all the way home, you're like fuming, it's like, and wait till I tell him or her I'm going to get him. And then you get home and you get ready to go at it. And as soon as you open your mouth, they're like, you are right, I am so sorry. And you're almost disappointed. You're like, okay then. Damn. And that same thing happens. They come to the training and they're like, oh, here we go. All those brand associations. Oh, here we go. And then someone like me stands in, this middle-aged lesbian woman stands in front of the room and says, I screwed it up. You didn't get it right, but I didn't do this right. And as a result is for the first 10, 15 years of my career, not only did I put you in a category of this